I'm going to demonstrate the installation of Windows 8. This is the release to manufacturer version, the generally available version, running on ESXi 5.1, which is also generally available now. So I'm going to cover how to create a template, a golden master image that you then clone or deploy from template as your needs see fit in your lab. Okay? So first thing is we need to run the vSphere client and log into vCenter rather than the ESXi host. We will need that for cloning capabilities. If we just want to build Windows 8 manually, without a simple way to clone, we can log in to vSphere client straight to the ESXi host. But here you'll see I'm pointing to my vCenter server. I've got the tree on the left expanded to the ESXi server. I clicked on configuration and storage, and we can see my data stores. So we've got enough room here for the ISO file. So this Kingston solid state is where I'm going to use browse data store to push a file up into. So I go to that folder called ISO that I have created, and I'm going to click on upload files to this data store. And I'm going to go with the 64-bit version. It's warning me if there's one already there. Do I want to continue? We know there's not. Now this has gotten a lot faster. It used to be you really needed Vmfast SCP for such a long file operation, but now it's not that big a deal to push this file up through the ESXi service console. Okay, we don't need to watch that. We can continue with creating the virtual machine while that's cranking along. So let me get started with that. Templates. I have a folder called templates. You might just have it right off your ESX host. Doesn't really matter. There's just a place to keep it. But virtual machine, new virtual machine is what I really want to do. I'm going to do custom, however. Click next. And I'm going to call it template. Okay, so that's template, uppercase, so it's really easy to spot, and then the host name, lowercase. This is just a convention I use to try to keep things straight. When I deploy from a template, it'll just be called Windows 8 VM. That'll be the host name of the virtual machine. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just click Next. Data store, it's already highlighted the one I want. Click Next. Virtual machine version 8, yes. I don't know why it doesn't show 9 here. We'll fix that in a minute. Click Next. Choose our Windows operating system, which is Windows 8 64-bit. Next. I'm going to give it 2 cores. Depends on what your needs are and what you'll pick here, of course. 2 gig, I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to change the adapter type to this optimized VMXNet 3, which is preferred. That'll be enabled once we install VMware tools. Click Next. I'm going to leave the SCSI controller alone. Create a new virtual disk, yes. For me, I'm used to just coming up with a number and sticking with it. So 750 gig thin provisioned, it's only going to use like 8 gig on the hard drive. But my C drive can grow enormously without having to worry about D drives or resizing C this way. Okay, thin provisioned gives me the luxury of without much of a performance impact. Putting it on a solid state drive thin provisioned, it really screams and doesn't unnecessarily take up space. Naturally, I have to watch very carefully for running out of space. So when I click Next, it gives me a nasty warning saying watch out if you fill up your solid state, for instance. It's bad. Okay, can leave this alone. And then finally, edit virtual machine settings. Click Continue. Now, there's a few changes I want to make. Let's just go down the list. Down arrow, CPUs, down arrow again to video. I'm going to want to turn that to auto and enable 3D support. In my case, I may want decent performance of the VM. Next, sorry, we can skip this one. I don't need to turn that on necessarily. Now we can go to DVD. Turn on data store, ISO file, connect to power on, very important, and then browse your way to that ISO file, which is now finished uploading to my Kingston drive, and there it is, all 3 terabytes of it. Click OK. Okay, taking a quick look at my notes. I'm missing a device, so I'm going to click Add and say USB controller. Next. And I want USB 3.0 support eventually. Click Next there as well, and click Finish. And again, looking at my notes, the other thing I do is I go to the Options tab and just quickly show you under these settings, I'll just show you what the defaults are. Just going to hit down arrow. So some of these you may want to adjust. Okay, that's it. Resources and profiles we can leave alone. So I click Finish. Virtual machine is created. What's next? Well, now that it's created, I can right-click it and say Upgrade Virtual Hardware. But before I do that, let me click on the Summary tab so you can see that right now, this virtual machine Summary tab shows VM version 8. When I right-click and say Upgrade Virtual Hardware, it changes to 9. So I don't know why that's not an option up front, but it just isn't. Okay, we can click Console View now and power it up. This should begin a very normal install of Windows 8. Notice in the bottom right of your screen, it recommends to release the cursor, press Control-Alt if you haven't discovered that already. When your mouse is held hostage like this, you'll need that keystroke to get the mouse out of this window you're in. $750 gig drive is what it thinks it has. And we just click Next. Okay, I'm going to speed up this portion of the video until something significant happens near the end of the install. Okay, we're ready to answer some questions. I'm going to give it the name we talked about earlier. It shows on the left. It's the same as a virtual machine name. Windows 8 VM. Okay. That can be changed after you clone from a template, of course, but that's the base image. 64-bit's assumed at this point. I only label my VMs 32-bit if they're 32-bit. Okay, click Next. Express I'm not going to use. I'm going to use Customize because I don't want Windows Update necessarily running. That can really bog down a VM if it hasn't been booted for months and it's got a lot of updates. Sometimes you just want to check something even without being network connected. So again, I'm going to leave that off. So if I click Customize, I have the opportunity to turn that off. These other settings, you may have preferences. I'm going to leave them all alone. We can use upper and lower with numbers and letters for this. So we can make a fairly strong password for this default password. And this is a default account. Okay, click Finish. It forces us to watch this video. once this video is done, the very first thing I'm going to do is install VMware Tools and Reboot. Okay, so here's the desktop, and it's kind of painful to use the mouse sluggish. Let me just take care of tools first before doing anything else. So I right click on the VM, I say guest, and I say install upgrade VMware Tools. Gives me a little heads up on what's going to happen. Click OK. Now a pop-up's going to come up in the VM. A drive letter is going to appear. It's basically just mounting an ISO file. Okay, we run it. If we miss that dialog box, the pop-up, it does timeout, you can just run Windows Explorer and manually double-click your CD-ROM drive letter. So portability concerns, if you're trying to think about running this in VMware Workstation perhaps, you might want to turn on complete. Or you could go typical, depending upon your preferences. You'll see some thin-app printing stuff that you might or might not want here during the install. So it's replacing my device drivers for my network adapter, which in the bottom right you can see has the red X through it. So as soon as that gets replaced, which is right now, you can see that coming to life. And then the video driver is going to blank the screen briefly. And there we go. So VMware Tools is done. Click Finish. Okay. And reboot. So on this boot, the network should be alive. Okay, so we're going to log in by double-clicking, type in the password, and we're in. So I'll point a couple things out. The network came to life, but if we right-click and open it up, it will say public network. And that's a sharing concern, basically. Let me explain. If we left-click here, this thing comes up, right? All right, let's do that again. Left-click, this thing comes up. What happens when you right-click on this connection? Turn sharing on or off comes up. If we turn sharing on, and check this again, we're now on private network. So that behavior is different than previous versions of Windows. But I do want a local subnet. I want the local workgroup machines to see each other. All right, so I've got a little checklist here, going through it, making sure captured all the key spots. Reboot, network sharing. Okay. Next thing, now that we have room for a little more elbow room here, we can do 1366 by 768 resolution. Excellent. Fills that up nicer. And next, auto login. So on the next reboot, I don't want to have to log in. I can simply hit Windows and R key, and that comes up, and we type netplwiz.exe. Can turn off the checkbox, click Apply, and type your password twice. And now we won't be nagged for that password on a reboot. Again, this is a lab, a base image that you want simple. You don't want to necessarily have to remember the password even when you first reboot it. Okay, so auto login is very handy in that circumstance. Okay, what other changes might we make? Clock. Let's do that. And I'm just adjusting my script a little bit. So I'm trying to pick a logical order here. You look at the bottom right and you'll see our clock is messed up. Well, you might not know that, but it never asked me my time zone. So it's assuming I want Pacific time. So let's just left click on the clock, change date and time settings, and fix my time zone up. And hit enter. So I hit down arrow and enter, I got to Eastern time. Okay, what about internet time though? I don't want to sync my clock that way. So I'm going to turn that off. Click OK and click OK. Now that I've done that, how will my clock stay in sync? Right click on the properties of the virtual machine, say edit settings, and here's something a little new. Go to options, VMware tools, that's where we set it. Synchronize guest time with host. Now, check and upgrade tools during power cycling can also be handy. It's a good way for to keep them in sync, but you know, you can also boot up the VM from time to time and do, say, Windows updates and a tools check to make a new golden master. So I actually tend to leave that off. So I click OK. So now my clock is now going to be synced. Great. I should point out that tools is hidden right here. So let's click customize and say let's show all icons. See what that did? It shows us the VMware tools icon. If we click it, there's no longer anything you can really set in there. So it used to be you set time syncing from there, now you don't. Okay. Screensavers. It's another consideration. How about we just hit Windows W for settings, search, and then just start typing. Screensaver. Just hit enter. Okay, so none is set. That's fine. Let's click change power settings, however, and dig in a little bit. Change plan settings. And it's turning off the display in 10 minutes. It's a virtual machine. We don't want it ever to do that. Do we want it to go to sleep? No. Okay. What's in advanced? Advanced is this key setting. Require a password on wake up? No. Okay, so click apply, click save changes, and close. Okay, those are much more appropriate settings for a VM. Next. Turn on remote desktop. Okay, how do we do that? Probably easiest to move our mouse to the bottom left, then simply right-click and choose System. And now we have the remote settings button right there. Turn it to allow from any level. Click OK. Depending upon your needs, you might want to turn off the any level. So now remote desktop is ready. So the rest of this video we can do over remote desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up. I like to test remote desktop and make sure sound works. So on my local machine, I hit Windows R. When I hit Windows R, I get the Run dialog. All right, just going to hit MSTSC. Hit Enter, and I get this. So what's the IP address of this virtual machine we've created? You can find it right there, 137. Don't ask me again if we like. And now So we're now looking at remote desktop connection. Super snappy, full speed ahead. Windows W, and now start typing sound. Just test out that sound is working. Okay, obviously it is. All right, we'll continue with my little script here about how to do stuff. Okay, the next piece is actually about when you reboot. I want some things to auto start, and I've got three kind of my favorite things. I want Task Manager to run minimized to give me sort of a free CPU monitor that runs down here in the tray. I want the desktop to show automatically, and I also want something called BG Info from sysinternals. Okay, so let's get started with Task Manager. In Task Manager, Windows Explorer, I'm going to go ahead and make a folder. So in my C drive, I'm going to make a folder called Command. It's where I put scripts and so forth. I hit enter, I'm in that folder now. Great. What do I want to do in the command folder? Actually, let's go up a level. So if we're in the root of the C drive and we point to command and I hold down shift, I can right click and say open command window here. There we are in the right folder. And now I can type notepad and then the name of this thing we're going to create, called Start Task Manager. It prompts me, do I want to do that? And say yes. What do we put in it? We put in just these 2 lines. So it's going to start Task Manager minimized and then exit. Close it and save changes. We're done with that command line as well. So now we have this icon. Okay, what do we do with it? Drag it to the desktop with the right mouse button. Let go, and it says, what do you want to do? We're going to say create a shortcut here. Let's right-click on that shortcut and choose the properties of the shortcut. Under Run Normal Window, let's Run Minimized Window. And then finally, click on the shortcut key and hit Control-T, and now it's grabbed that key combo. We can always bring up Task Manager no matter what we're doing in that VM very quickly without even having to click on the mouse. We click OK. Now we have a handy-dandy shortcut to run Task Manager. Well, that's nice, but what are we going to do with it? Well, we want it in the startup folder. How do we do that? Hit the Windows and R key to bring up Run. Type shell : common startup. Hit enter. And that's our startup folder. Right-click and drag that shortcut you made in the desktop. Let go. It says, what do you want to do? We're going to say move. We need permission, just say continue. Okay, that worked. Now if we double click it, we can test it. So it worked. You can see it's running here. And let's open up its settings. Let's go to settings that we like more. So more details, perhaps the performance view. And then under options, we probably want to turn on always on top and turn on hide when minimized. I have another video with all sorts of tips about Task Manager. And then close it so we can save those settings. Now let's run that shortcut again. All right, so we now have a CPU monitor. If we move our mouse over, it tells us CPU, memory, disk, and network busyness. All right? If we open it up and minimize it again, it does disappear from here. So that's the minimize when used setting. Okay, so that works, and now we have a CPU monitor ready at all times. Really handy for remote VMs, just machines that are virtual or far away from you. So I mentioned that's one of the 3 startup icons I wanted. What's another one? Well, here's another one. In the command folder, we can do right-click, new, text document. show desktop.scf. Double click it to edit it, and paste this in from my website or type it in. Basically, this is bringing back the icon that you used to use to show your desktop, bringing it forward to Windows 8. So you now will have that ability to get to the desktop. Hit close and save, and now we have this thing that can be moved. So we don't need to make an actual shortcut this time. Sorry about that, I clicked the wrong thing. Here's the remote session. Here's a shortcut. This time, this file we actually want to move. It says I need administrator permission. I say continue. Okay, so whether we did it on the desktop or in some folder, it doesn't really matter. It just, I don't believe it'll let you create the file in the startup folder to begin with. There's some restrictions there. It's a little weird. Okay, so that's done. And then the last one is bginfo. Well, bginfo. How do I get it, first of all? Let me show you. I like to do a drive letter mapping. So just 1 second while I set that up. All right, so there's a user on my server named user with the same password. So setting up drive letter mapping should be very easy. For instance, my server is called Zilla. Just type that. Right-click on the folder I want to map. Say Map Network Drive. Hit I on my keyboard and hit Enter. It's going to reconnect its sign-in. It's that easy. And boom, we're in. So jumping to bginfo, whoops, rather easy as well. Here's the executable. And let's stick it in another folder. We're going to call util. It's just my convention. You may have your own favorites. So for programs you don't install, you can do something like that. We just launch them. All right, there's a little more to this. Looks like I should not have closed my startup folder, but I did. So I'm going to hit Windows R again, Common Startup, hit Enter. Okay, so now we get the startup folder back. bginfo belongs there, that's true. So again, we create a shortcut. We right-click, say Properties, and we want to add a parameter here, / timer. Sorry, I got to look that up. I don't know if I got that right. Look at those properties again. Right-click, Properties, timer 0. Okay, let me look at my reference spreadsheet here, or actually the bginfo website, just to be 100% sure. And here's the website. We hit Control F / timer 0. So yes, that is the command. So we now have a shortcut, and that shortcut is ready for us to move into the startup folder. Right-click, drag, select move, say continue when you're warned. Those are the 3 things I wanted in my startup folder. Okay, back to my network share. One other utility I find indispensable is called Power Off. It's been around for a decade, still works fine. So I'm going to copy that to my util folder. Right-click and drag to the taskbar. It pins it to the taskbar. We run it that very first time. We say power. We want to do a reboot and force application to close. This is the settings I like. So if I'm in a remote desktop connection, normally you can't reboot without having to remember shutdown /R/T5 command or something like that. kind of easy to just click on this and reboot, even in a remote desktop connection. But the key here is to save these settings. So reboot, force application to close is now the default. Okay, so I'm now testing it. If we go back to this interface, you'll see that it's rebooting. Okay, it's done rebooting. On my local machine, Windows R, MSTSC, and I'll go ahead and reconnect. Okay, I didn't give it enough time to automatically go to the desktop. So I just want to point that out. And we're done with this notepad. We also never ran bginfo. Okay, that makes sense. So auto start, it did auto start things. It started Task Manager, but bginfo had never been run before. So the very first time you're on bginfo, it prompts you with that icon. So the next reboot should be clean. Okay, what else we got here? Windows Explorer and Task Manager over here. See how Task Manager is running here. If I click here and then just minimize it, it will go away from the tray. So only once is that needed. Ever after, you can just click there, or you can hit Control-T and it instantly comes up if you accidentally close it. So if we actually close it entirely and hit Control-T, and did not come up. So I forgot about that. If it's not on the desktop, Control-T is not going to work. So remember, we moved the shortcut away from the desktop folder. So yeah, hotkeys are not going to work. Oh well. Let's move on. I'll think of a better way at some point. Turn on details in Explorer. Actually, I'm going to bring up my Task Manager again. I just like having it there. Okay. Bring up Windows Explorer, Details View. So click on View, Options, Change Options. Go to the View, and many Windows administrators for many years have been changing this. They don't like the defaults. Hide file extensions for known file types is really annoying. Show full path in the title bar is very helpful. Those are my two changes I do. And then finally, under View, I tend to do Details View, and then close it. And now when I launch Explorer, I've got a Details View. And it's no longer hiding extensions. Okay, done with that. Okay, show Windows version on desktop. It shows right now, but I haven't activated Windows yet. Once you activate Windows, this goes away on the release to manufacturer version, the GA version. So move our mouse to here, right click, and notice regedit is not there. So let's just do run and type regedit. Say yes, and open up the key. So H key, current user, control panel, desktop, paint desktop version. Just type 1, hit OK. Hex and decimal the same, 1. Now we're all set. That Windows 8 Pro is always going to show. It's just something I like. Next, turn off DVD mounting. Where do we do that? Back in the vSphere client. So we look here, say Edit Settings. You'll see the DVD is still on. Okay, toggling right back to the virtual machine. Let's poke around. DVD is still on. So there's a couple changes I like to make. If we move to the bottom left, right click, and say Disk Management. Let's change the drive letter to V. way out of the way. If I had new drives, I kind of like them to be sequential. C and a D drive, for instance. So let's get the CD way out of the way. Okay, that's done. Now, back in vSphere Client, we can point to turning these off and go to Client Device. No need for it to be trying to mount an ISO file or point to that repository in any way. So it's just a little bit of post-install cleanup that I like to do. And we're in the home stretch here. We're basically done. Back to the remote desktop connection, full screen view there. Notice the drive V still shows, just nothing's mounted there. There's no data in it. Okay. So what's last? Well, when you're ready to call this a template, and it's kind of you're ready to deploy other virtual machines from it, clones of it, licensing is definitely a concern. So let me show you. So we can do this, bring up remote desktop, sorry about that. We can bring up this article where I talk about licensing, but it boils down to this command. It's basically a slmgrvbs. So I'm going to use remote desktop connection because then I have a shared clipboard. So there's a really good reason I have this connection going rather than the console. And actually I want an administrator command line. So move my mouse to the bottom, right click, and say command prompt admin, and say yes. And now I am ready to paste it in from my cheat sheet and naturally edit this out for privacy reasons or blur it out. Okay, it's done. So the point is I'm able to activate, and why would I activate? Well, if you have a volume license agreement, a single license key shared among many VMs, that might be desirable. Most users might want to hold that activation step you just saw me do until the very end, after you clone an image that you know you're going to keep. Just ignore the warnings about activate Windows now, and activate it when you need to. So two different schools of thought, but if you have a volume license key, you might want to do it the way I just did. So now if we click on System, down here you can see Windows is activated. So that's done. Okay, looking through my script. We're ready to call it a template. So now that we're done building and making things the way we like, on BG info and this in the bottom right, one last touch would be the really distracting flowers. So I'm going to go ahead and personalize and click on desktop background, click on picture location and say solid, and just going to go to a solid color. Not that one. All right. And that's it. Just to show you, Reboot works, and then show you automatic desktop showing up also works. So we're doing a last reboot. And now you should see the reboot. You should see the behavior we're expecting. That is, BG info paints the desktop, and we drop to the desktop a few seconds after the formerly known as Metro UI shows up. So wait a minute, wait for it, wait for it. Nothing. So I'm guessing BG info is triggering me up. Now we didn't get a password prompt, but we didn't get to the desktop like we were expecting either. Okay, there's our problem. Show desktop.scf. .text. It appended .text. We got the wrong type in there. So let's do shell common startup, brings up this. Rename that. And now the show desktop icon even shows up the way it's supposed to. All right, so it's going to work this time. So we can do reboot through there, or of course, our desktop didn't change or keep its color either. So let's fix that again. So that kind of hints, well, that's interesting. Desktop background. Yeah, BG info just kicked in while I was in here. Very strange. So until the desktop, all right, let's just reboot. So right-click power, shut down guest. Tools is working because it's communicating with the VM and telling it to reboot. And now we wait and watch and see if we finally got this to work. Okay, I accidentally clicked shutdown rather than reboot. See that right in the log in the bottom there. So I'm powering it up now. Occasionally you get the console disappearing unless you bring up a separate console window. I don't know why, it's just a bug I've seen. Okay, bug's been worked around. We can see what's going on. Still failed to bring up the desktop. All right, Windows R, start run, shell common startup. Let's have a look here. BG info properties, /timer 0. So that should be working. And let's run BG info. Open a file explorer, point to my C drive, util. What happens if you just launch BG info? Everything looks normal. That's how it's supposed to look. And the time remaining continues and then counts and goes away. So that's just normal BG info and it updates the desktop. So everything seems fine there. But show desktop really doesn't seem to want to work. If we look at properties, it's a file explorer command is what it's calling it. Can we pin it? We can. So if we click that, will it minimize everything? Nope. So I don't think pinning it made much sense. Well, let's try that again. No. Okay, I'm going to create it all over again. So I've deleted the botched icon. Let's go to Command. Let's go to right-click, New. And get my article out here again that tells me what to do with this thing. Okay, we're going to need terminal services again. So MSTSC, run on my local machine, reconnect to this VM. I need a clipboard, so I don't have to type this stuff. All right, great. File, New. And no, because that's going to add an extension. So I'm just going to hit Windows W, Windows Q for apps, Notepad. And I've got Notepad going. Paste those lines in. Go and close it. It asks me to save it. And we'll call it exactly what this article tells me to call it, not that it really matters. So if we say win SCP, or sorry, we turn it to all files and then say SCF, that should work. It did. If we click it, everything minimizes. It worked. Okay, so that's good. We have a valid shortcut. Head back to command. This needs to get moved to Windows R, startup folder. Sorry, let's try that again. Right-click, drag to startup folder. Say move. Gives me a warning. We say continue. And we're ready to test it. Okay, so we're going to watch it reboot. Wait for it. A few more seconds in my experience. We should see the desktop revealed. And there it is. Nice. Okay, so we're finally ready to shut this now complete template down and call it a VM. I'm going to click on summary. I want to see what this is warning me about. Okay, it's warning me about space left on the disk. Okay, right-click and say shut down the guest. It's a graceful shutdown, as you can see. Okay. Now we're ready to right-click it and say template, convert to template. So we've turned a read-write VM into a read-only VM, and it disappears from my templates folder. Why? Because I now have to go to VMs and templates to see it again. And there it is. Template Windows 8 is the one I just created. Okay, you'll see the settings. There's the IP address it last had. You may remember that. All right, we can clear that warning. If you look at, okay, so the VM template is right here. We want to deploy from that template. So let's say deploy virtual machine from this template. Now here's something we could do. Let me cancel that. Sorry. I'm going to hit F2 to rename, right? And then hit Control-C to copy, or right-click copy. So now we've got that in our clipboard, right? Now we go to right-click and say deploy virtual machine from this template. Paste. So that's going to have all Windows updates. And we could even do something like, so that shows I've run Windows Update on it. So that way I have a clue what I'm deploying when I go to deploy from the template at a much later date. Okay? Once in a while I can change a template into a VM, boot it, do all the Windows updates, shut it down, and rename it. So that's the point here. Now, the underlying file system does not change in the VMFS file system. In other words, it's always going to say September 22nd no matter what, even when I rename a VM later. So I'm going to go with a more generic name, template, and the host name, and then with updates. How about just call it Windows Updates. And then after I deploy from it, I'll put a date at the end of it when the updates were actually run. It's going to ask me where it goes, templates folder. And I have to think about where. I need a place with space. Same format as source, which is 10. That's fine. Power on the virtual machine after, sure. And click finish. I'm not doing any customizing, no sysprepping. I don't need that for a simple small lab like this. Go back to hosts and clusters and turn off alarms. Go back to tasks. So here it is cloning, right? And it's in the midst of copying this virtual machine. It should not take very long. The virtual machine is right here. And once the virtual machine is ready, the cloning is done, it's going to boot. It's a little slower than my solid state, the way I have it set up, the array it's going to be on now. So the boot time is going to be just a little longer. Why am I showing you all this? Because I like to make two golden masters. One with no Windows update whatsoever. That might be best to say just testing out if some software is compatible. And another one that's more practical that has all 20 or 30 Windows updates run. Well, I don't have to worry about those. It kind of gives me a leg up. And that one I'm going to turn Windows Update on automatically. So when I deploy from one of those and say power on when done, it has a few updates to do and it'll power up and just take care of it. Notice how quickly it finished. It's done. And now it's booting. Occasionally we get these video blanking issues. So if I open up the console, I can work around those. It has powered on, but we're not seeing anything yet. And there we go. It's an annoying bug. I'm not sure what is the cause or what to do about it, but at least I can work around it. Then the original window comes back. So notice, when you deploy from a template like this, even though you didn't sysprep it, it still changes some of the underlying hardware and tricks Windows 8 into going through the welcome video as if it's a new PC or something. It's not the same as sysprep, but yeah, that's just the way it behaves. So we have to just wait it out. I'm not going to click on anything or do anything. I just want to see what happens when this video is done. Is it going to bring up the Metro looking UI or is it going to go to the desktop? Okay, so it looks like for that last boot, it did something like, run a video for the user. Nothing I can do about that. So, click here, say System, and then we can get the old school view of Windows Update with all the details. There's another one in sort of the Metro UI, but it hides too much. So I'm going to turn on automatic updates and just let her rip. Now, if this was Windows 7, there'd be a whole lot more updates. Or this is after Windows 8 is actually released. Generally available October 26th. So there'll also be a lot more updates between now and then, I would guess. Okay, I'll go ahead and restart. The idea here is I want to run Windows Update until it's clean and there are no more updates. Shut it down and call it a template and add the date to the end of the template. The date being today that I last ran the updates. That's it. That's my scheme for Golden Masters. As far as sysprepping, answering a host name and a fixed IP and so forth, that tends to be more common on servers where you hardcode that stuff. For a client, you don't really need to worry about that complexity for deploying Windows 8. Okay, we wait. The video did not play back. In a few more seconds, we should see our desktop automatically. And we did. And there's no sign of Windows Activation Wizard complaining because I have a volume license version. Windows is activated. See, it's not complaining even despite the hardware change. So this is a rather clean deployment. And let's run system again and see if Windows Update wants anything else. Okay, there's still another. I'm going to click on Change Settings there. It does say Automatic. That's good. So the change did stick, and now we've got this other vulnerability. And let's install that one. Reboot it again and see if we're clean. Okay, that one doesn't even need a reboot. I'm going to reboot anyway and make sure, again, that Windows Update does not ask me anything anymore. Desktop will show. There it is. I did not click anything. Now I'll bring up the mouse. And we're done. So we could shut down from here, or we can shut down from here. Okay, my templates folder should have nothing in it. These were old trials. Template should only be visible when we go to the templates view. So watch this. Right click, say template, and convert it to a template. So now the templates folder is empty like it should be. Go over to here to VMs and templates. And all our templates really stand out. They have an all uppercase font there. And if they're actually in the proper mode, where they're in read-only mode, they have the little page icon. So that's it. We've got a template, got another one we just created. And then I mentioned, if we look at the file system here, this is kind of cool. You can see how much it actually takes up in the data store. It's going to be on the word template. And it's under 10 gig, okay? can see the date and time a few minutes ago. So there's my template. And notice it's got a clean folder name. It doesn't have a date on it. When we change the date here to say okay, going back to here, hitting refresh, no change. So the underlying file system doesn't change. So I'm in good shape now. I've got things as I like them. And I deploy from whichever template I want. One is on the Kingston. One happens to be on a RAID array. Doesn't really matter. Most of the time you're going to put it on maybe cheaper storage, or you have a large library of templates. You want to keep it on slightly cheaper and slower storage. I'm impatient and tend to keep it on SSD storage. But that's really a wrap for this video. You already saw how I right-click and say deploy virtual machine from this template, and then just give it a name, like Windows 8 VM. And I tend to be doing something with it, like testing USB or something, horsing around with it and then nuking it in a week. But let's just see. We just want sort of a master Windows 8 VM to kick around with that name. I don't think I have any with that name right now. Put it in my clients folder. Put it on an array with plenty of room. Power on the VM when done. And click next and walk away. So this thing will clone. It'll boot. Windows Update will auto start. So if it's a year from now, a whole lot of Windows updates will be pulled down. And with minimal interaction, I'll just be ready to horse around with Windows 8 from there forward. So there you have it. Hopefully you found this long video helpful. Sorry for the misstep on the show desktop technique, but eventually I got that working as well. Hopefully you learned a few things along the way. Thank you for watching. All feedback always appreciated.